Hi, I'm Pete, and welcome to Just a Few Acres Farm. Sometimes I get comments asking why we bother to make our own hay on a small farm. So in this video, I'm going to go through the financial math of why we make our own hay and give you the tools to figure out whether making hay makes sense for your small farm. But aside from the math of it, you have to do what you love, and I love making hay. I love the self-sufficiency of it. I couldn't imagine raising cattle without making my own hay. And it gives me a chance to work all my old farm-alls that I love. Although making hay can be stressful, on the whole it actually eliminates stress for me because I don't have to depend on somebody else. I don't have to worry every year about whether my hay supplier will come through with what I need. I don't have to worry about the quality of my hay, and I don't have to worry about getting cheated on the weight of the hay that I'm buying. And a final aspect is I need a way to take care of my pastures when the grass growth gets ahead of me. I want to keep our cattle on optimal growth grass, so I need to make hay if it gets past me. So let's get into calculating whether it makes financial sense for you to make your own hay. The first step is to figure out how much hay you'll actually need. And I have a video on this which I'll put up here called How Much Hay Will My Dexter Eat? And it really applies to any breed, but let's go into my case. I need about 100,000 pounds of hay per year, or 50 tons. This translates to about 100 5x5 round bales, which is the kind of hay I make. It also translates into about 200 4x4 round bales, or about 2,500 small square bales. Step two is to figure out how much buying that hay would cost. So if I need 200 4x4 round bales, the cost of a round bale around here is about 30 to 40 bucks. So if I bought 200 of them, it would be $7,000. If I went the square bale route and bought 2,500 square bales around here cost $3 to $5 each, so I would spend 10 grand in small square bales. There's quite a price difference, and that has to do, I think, with the labor and the slowness of baling small square bales. Now that I know how much it would cost me to buy my hay, I need to figure out how much it would cost me to make it. And there's three categories to that cost. Number one is your equipment investment. Number two is your operational costs, and number three is your labor. The first thing you need to invest in to make hay is tractors, and we've got two for making hay, the 656 and the 504. 656 is the cutting and baling tractor. The 504's got a loader on it for moving bales around. This 656 cost me $3,000. I've got another $5,000 into it. The 504 cost me $3,000, and I've got another $4,000 into it. So if you add that up, that's $15,000 in tractor costs. Next is a Haybine. This cost me $1,000. I've got another $300 into it in wear parts, so that's $1,300 total. I got this junky old 2-star tedder for free, but if I went to auction and bought one, I'd probably pay $1,500 for a 4-star tedder, so we'll figure that. This rake cost me $1,200. I've got another $200 into it and replacement teeth for a total of $1,400. This old round baler cost $1,200. This dilapidated old bale wagon cost me $300. Yes, I could have a nicer one, but this one works just fine. This brings me to a total equipment cost of $20,700, most of which is invested in the two tractors. I could have gotten away much cheaper on the tractor side by having just one tractor instead of two. You don't need two tractors. I just find it more convenient. This is a line of equipment we need for a herd our size, 35 head. If you have a smaller farm, you can get by with investing much less money. In fact, when we started, we didn't use this line at all. We had an H tractor, which I already owned. We had a sickle bar mower, which I already owned cut. We had a rake that a neighbor loaned me for free, and we had a small square baler that cost me $1,200, and we made 300 to 1,000 square bales a year for years with that, feeding a small herd, with only that $1,200 investment, which I made back in the first year. I did a custom baling job for a neighbor. It was worth $1,200. I got my money back. So you can start much smaller than we did with much less investment. $1,700 may seem like a huge number, and it's a number that would floor me if I went out and spent all that money at once. But what happened is we had this small line to start with, and then as we grew, I gradually went out and bought our current hay line of equipment one piece at a time. So that $20,000 investment was spaced out over about 5 years. Now let's look at operational costs, and these are the expendables spent every year to take care of the equipment and make the hay. I spend about $750 in fuel every year to run the tractors. I spend about $500 in wear parts, which include things like maintenance on the tractors, new knife sections and guards for the mower when they wear out, new teeth for the rake when they wear out, miscellaneous little things that need to be replaced. And we can't forget the cost of baling twine. When we were making small squares, the last year when we did 3,500, I spent about $200 on sisal twine for our square baler. When we started round baling, the cost went way down. Now I spend about 50 bucks a year on plastic twine for our round baler. So if you add all those operational costs up, I spend about $1,300 a year on them. Yes, some years or more I may have a major breakdown and have to spend more money, but some years it's also less. The third part of the equation is labor costs, and this is a funky one for me because I don't figure any particular hourly wage for me or Hillary on the farm. Instead, what we do is we figure out how much money our family needs to make a living off the farm. Then we work backwards from there into how many animals we raise and profit per animal. For me, any work I do on the farm, labor-wise, is just in there. It's part of that total number, and making hay falls into that category. Now, if you want to figure it out, I spend about 80 hours a year making hay, give or take. So you can assign whatever hourly wage you want to that. So now let's do the math. I have roughly $21,000 invested in haymaking equipment. And if I bought hay, it would cost me roughly $7,000 a year. So it's simple. To recoup my equipment investment, I need to make hay for about 3 years. 7 times 3 is $21,000. After year 3, I'm in a good place because I'm only spending about $1,300 a year in operational costs to make my hay. Now all this begs the next question, which is, what if you don't want to use junk like I do to bale your hay? What if you want newer equipment and you're not mechanically inclined to fix up all this stuff that I run? Well, then the equation changes quite a bit. I'm not an expert on the cost of newer equipment, but I'm guessing you'd spend 50 grand on a tractor that's this size in the 65 horsepower class. You'd probably spend 10 grand on a rake and a tedder. You'd probably spend 15 grand on a disc bine, and you'd probably spend another 15 grand on a modern round baler. So you're looking at close to $100,000, and that really tips the scales the other way. So it all depends on what you're comfortable with. Now there is a third option that's kind of in between making your own hay versus buying in hay, and that's hiring a custom haymaker to make hay off your own land. And you can probably expect to pay about half of what you would pay for just buying your hay in for this. And if you're going to plan on doing that, it's important to establish a good relationship with a custom haymaker because you want to be towards the top of their list when you want your hay made. And I find that the best way to do that is, number one, establish a good rapport with them, and number two, pay them in cash on the day they finish. That always gets their attention. Running through these scenarios can help you make an informed decision when you're trying to decide which way to go with your farm. And I think what also applies is the size of your farm, of course. If you have less than 5 head of cattle, it really is hard to justify making hay unless you have a strong desire to do so, like I do. And you may be better off buying in your hay. For herds that are above 5 up to about 20 cattle, you know, a small line of haying equipment like we started with may make the most sense. And maybe you can split it so that you hire out your first big cutting of the year and then you make your own hay for the next. There's a lot of flexibility there. And for herds that are above 20 head going up to our size 35 and above, it probably makes sense to have your own line of haying equipment, especially if you can get by with older equipment like we do. And finally, 2 words of wisdom. Number one, you have to do what you're comfortable with. If you love to make hay, that's great. If you don't want to deal with big equipment, that's okay too. You can buy in your hay. You have to do what you love. And that's the biggest part about farming that I can't stress too much. If you don't love it, it's just a job. If you love it, it's a life. I hope this video was informative. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you next time.